Well, I hate to say it, but this Craftsman project took a turn for the worst, and I was not expecting it to end this way. I mean, it was a running tractor when I went to look at it and everything, and it ran pretty good too. Started right up after sitting since the summer. That was a couple weeks ago, and it ran pretty good for the few minutes that he had it running. So I figured, I mean, it's not in bad shape or anything, so it ought to make an easy, project tractor. I could, bring it home, tune it up, and then flip it for an easy buck. And for $50, I couldn't really refuse. But unfortunately, things took a turn for the worst. I mean, since the last video, I already gave an overview of the tractor, but since the last video, I pressure washed it all, got it all cleaned up, and got all the dirt, or most of the dirt and everything off of it, and it cleaned up pretty nice. I mean, you can see the scratches and the wear marks and stuff, but it cleaned up pretty easily. The pressure washer took care of most of it, and everything's in good shape too. I mean, I still have some things to do to it, like I'm gonna grease the axle, grease the spindles if I can, if they have greasable shafts, and then sharpen the blades and just do the usual stuff. Belts are all in good shape. And I put fresh gas in it too, and I've just been trying to get this thing started. I haven't done any carburetor work, but let's see. The only thing I did to it was I bypassed the anti-backfire solenoid, which threads it on the bottom of the bowl there. I just took a metric bolt with the washer or the O-ring on it and sealed it up, bypassed that, because when that goes bad, that causes a lot of problems. And I think I showed you in the last video, I also replaced the fuel filter in the line, so it was getting gas for sure. I had good fuel in the tank too, so it was getting fuel, and I replaced the spark plug for good measure, and then I checked the coil gap, and it was getting plenty of spark. And I could tell it had a lot of compression because the automatic compression release locked up because the valves were out of adjustment, and because of that, it was hard to turn over. So I got a hold of an inch-pounds torque wrench and my feeler gauge. I set the feeler gauge to 4,000ths, and I taught myself how to adjust these valves on these overhead. I think it's the same for most of these overhead Briggs motors. The only other overhead valve Briggs motor I had was my 26 horsepower V-twin that my John Deere LA150 had. The last IC Briggs motor I had was just a flathead, or an L-head, whatever you want to call it. Had the valves in the block. It wasn't an overhead valve like this. But this is a learning experience for me, adjusting valves, and it wasn't too hard to do. I just had to get I had to borrow a torque wrench, an inch-pounds torque wrench. But it was a pretty easy thing to do. So I got the valves adjusted, and I freed up the compression release, and the thing spun over nice and easy. But it was getting fuel, it was getting spark, and it had lots of compression, and it still wouldn't start. And from what I understand with these Briggs motors, most of the time when that happens, it's because it's out of time. And on a motor this small, the only way to adjust the timing is to make sure the flywheel is timed with the crankshaft. You see the crankshaft has that little keyway there, and then there's a keyway on the flywheel, and that's what keeps it in time. I figured it was out of time because it was backfiring through the carburetor when I cranked it. So I figured I'd check the timing. So I pulled the flywheel screen off, and lo and behold, I found out that the flywheel key sheared off, and it cracked this piece off of that boss on the top of the flywheel. So I was really pissed about that. But I'm not sure if you can see that. The keyway is right there. You can see there's a piece of the key right there, and basically the key just slipped out and it cracked this whole piece off. So yeah, that was kind of disappointing. And I looked up the price of a brand new flywheel for this particular motor, and it came out to like $200. So I figured I should probably stay away from it. Then I went on eBay and I bought another replacement flywheel. It was off of another 14.5 horsepower motor. So I figured it had to be the same one, but once I got it, I only paid like 20 bucks for it, so I figured, this probably should work. But when I got it, I mounted it up, and I realized it uses a different ring gear than that flywheel does. This flywheel has the ring gear tack welded onto the bottom of the flywheel, and the other, this ring gear is tack welded to the bottom of the flywheel, and the one that I bought has the ring gear welded or riveted onto the bottom of the flywheel. So I would have to drill the rivets out and then swap them over somehow. But that was going to be a lot of trouble, and I figured, you know what, I have to have the right one for this. I can't you know, be using the wrong parts. It turned out to be a lot more trouble than I expected, because that particular ring gear would not engage with the starter, and I'd try and get the starter to spin and it would just lock up, and if I tried to adjust the flywheel on the crankshaft, it would just grind the gear. So I pulled it off because that would be no use. And then I did a little more inspection, and I found out that, I don't know if you can see that, I found out that the keyway there on the crankshaft is basically chipped and sheared. That must have happened when it broke the original flywheel and sheared the key off. So that basically renders the crankshaft useless, and I'm really not happy about that. I mean, you can I don't know if you can see it on the video there, my camera won't focus. But it's actually chipped and sheared off on both sides of that keyway. So that was the reason that the crankshaft key kept getting sheared off, and I bought a new 3/16 inch crankshaft key for it, and it wouldn't fit. It just kept sliding out when I went to I put the key in the keyway, and then I put that other flywheel on it, and it just kept wanting to jam up because it was trying to slide out of the keyway because it's cracked. So it's basically rendered useless. And these little Briggs & Stratton motors are like a dime a dozen. So instead of rebuilding it, you're better off either parting it out or just buying another replacement one off of another tractor, because these frames are pretty much universal. They're built to just, you know, swap virtually any vertical shaft motor in there. Now the problem with that is around here, for what these tractors go for around here, I could probably get about, I don't know, $350 or $400 if I tried to sell this thing as a running machine. But by the time I bought a new flywheel for it and tore it apart and put a new crankshaft in it, and you know, God knows what else is broke inside there, because it's thrown out of balance. By the time I got that all taken apart, fixed, and put back together, I'd have more money in it than I'd be able to make as a profit, given that $350 to $400 price range for my region. So I figured, you know what, it's not worth all the trouble. It's more trouble than, you know, it would cost more money to have it fixed and working properly than I'd be able to make out of it. And being, you know, a cheap entry-level tractor that was in running condition, I figured, you know, for $50, what the heck, I could probably make tune it up and make a good easy profit off of it. But because this happened, I just decided to stop putting money into it before it gets any worse, before I screw anything else up. So what I've decided to do is, like I said, because buying another motor or buying a whole new flywheel and crankshaft would put me further in the hole, what I've decided to do is just pull this motor off of it and just sell it as a rolling chassis, because everything else is in really good shape. I mean, it all cleaned up real nice, as you can see. Basically what I'm gonna do is sell this as a package deal. Like, you can buy the motor if you want. I'm putting all the parts and stuff in the box here. So the motor's out of it, but I'll sell that with it, or you could buy without it, either way. And then if you have the ability to rebuild it, you could rebuild it and drop it in and go. Or if you have an extra motor sitting around, drop it in and go. Because otherwise, everything on this machine is just about good to go. Everything works, you know, it runs and drives. The belts are in good shape. The only thing I still need to do to it is, you know, grease the axles and the mower deck if I can, and undercoat the mower deck with oil to keep it from rusting, grease the spindles if I can. I'm not sure if they have grease fittings, and then clean up the deck and sharpen the blades. Otherwise, there's really not much else I have to do. I thought it had an electrical problem because the thing needed to jump whenever I wanted to start it, but I just ended up replacing the battery with a Napa battery, and that took care of it, because now it'll hold the charge. I mean, has plenty of charge, so it's good to know that that eliminated one problem. All we had to do was just replace the battery and took care of that. So what I'm going to do now is drain the oil out of this, and then I'm going to yank the motor out and put it in the box, and then we'll sell this as a rolling chassis. So let's see how that goes. I'm about to get started on it. So I'm just draining the oil right now, and I can use this to undercoat the deck. I would highly recommend doing this if you guys have a tractor that you do a lot of mowing with, because it keeps the deck, not only does it act as a lubricant, sort of like that graphite coating stuff, but it also locks out rust. It keeps the deck from getting rusty underneath, which is, in most cases, it's just about inevitable, because these things are prone to wet grass and things like that, but it definitely helps. So, yeah, I would highly recommend coating your mower deck with used engine oil. Keep the rust out. The motor is out after a couple hours of pain and frustration. Even though this motor is pretty light, it's aluminum block and everything, it was still difficult to fit the jack up in there and everything. But I finally got it out, and I can't figure out what. I think this carriage bolt is used to remove the PTO belt guard, which I didn't think about that until it was too late. So I just left that in there, took the impact wrench and busted off the PTO, just right there. There's a double pulley, and then I put the flywheel together, and you can easily take it off and see the broken piece of that boss there. And then I bagged everything. Here's, you know, engine mount and PTO bolts, and the bolts for the fan shroud, or the flywheel cover, which is under the hood there. So that's what a Craftsman looks like, or what pretty much any entry-level lawn tractor frame looks like without a motor. You can see there's several mount holes here. They make these frames universal, so you can fit pretty much any vertical shaft motor in it. So I'm going to pressure wash this again, clean it all up, degrease it, and I've got the wires here. I'm going to have to zip tie them into place so they're not hanging all over the place. Just clean it up a little bit. I'll put the air shroud piece on the top, put that back, and I also had to get the mower deck off in the process. It uses almost like a brake line attached to the spring here to engage and disengage the PTO when you move this lever. So I got the deck off. It wasn't too hard to do. I'm going to pressure wash that, clean that up, and undercoat it. There's the oil there from draining it out. So I'll get to work on that soon. Now I'll just put the motor in the box with all the parts. I'll tie the wires up and everything, and put it in the box, and then this will sell. I can sell this with it or separately as like a separate accessory, whatever you want to call it, and be good for a rebuild. I just don't have the time or care to rebuild it. So that's the next step. Then I'll get it cleaned up and everything. Okay, so I didn't have much daylight to work with yesterday, but I was able to get the mower deck undercoated. I finished draining out the oil in my pan over there, and well, there wasn't a whole lot left because a lot of it spilled out when I did the valve adjustment and when just from use, I guess, when it was still running. So there wasn't a whole lot of oil left to drain out. But what was left, I took this little brush here and I just kind of gave a quick coat to the underside of the deck. And from what I understand, this is an old farmer's trick to help lock out rust and things like that. And with a mower deck like this, I mean, when you're mowing a lot of wet grass and stuff, these things are prone to rust no matter how much or how little you use them or how old they get. So it's a good step to take. It's just an old farmer's trick, I found out. So I gave it a good coat of the used oil, and I took the blades off to sharpen it, and I realized that these are gator blades because they had these special teeth on them, and I had a set of these on my LA150, and they're really good blades for mulching, but without a mulch plug, all they do is make a big mess, because with these teeth, I have the deck upside down, so it's not easy to give a demonstration of them, but basically with these teeth, it redirects the airflow under the deck, so when it first cuts the grass clippings, the airflow basically sucks them up into the top of the deck again, and it just keeps cutting them over and over until it shreds them up into really small pieces. So that's what those teeth are designed to do. They don't actually have anything to do with cutting the grass clippings. They just redirect the airflow in the upward direction. got the deck all mounted up, and she's pretty much good to go now. This is the last time you'll see it before I put it for sale on Craigslist. So basically I'm going to just sell this thing as a roller. Everything on it is ready to go. I got the PTO hooked up, and I got all the linkages hooked up. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. There's one there, and then there's one there. There's your two upper arms. There's one there, and then there's one on the other side. There's a hanger arm on the back, which is a little funny. Hooks up over there, and then here's your PTO cable, which wraps around and hooks into there with a little cotter pin, and hooks into that idler pulley there with a cotter pin. So it's hard to see because there's no light under there, but it was pretty straightforward. I got the tractor all cleaned up and everything. Rolls and moves nice and easy. I know the transmission works because when the motor was still running, I saw it work. And it's got the new fuel filter and everything. Motor has a new air filter, but you can probably swap it over if you don't want to rebuild this motor. Here's everything in the box. I mean, the motor's in there. I drained the oil out of it, so it's not going to leak. Flywheel cover, muffler, PTO clutch. There's the old flywheel down there. I don't know if you can see that. And then a bunch of extra bolts and stuff. Then over here is a bunch of spare belts and everything for it. So I'm going to sell this as a package deal. You know, take the motor with you. You can either rebuild it and drop it in, or just, you know, find a cheap running motor out of another tractor and drop that in. Like I said before, these frames are pretty much universal, so you can mount pretty much any aluminum block vertical shaft motor in there. They have a bunch of mounting holes for that reason. So if you have a motor sitting around, I mean, it should be able to mount right up. Just check and make sure it works first. And I would highly recommend that it has the same size crankshaft so it can fit the PTO. That's the biggest thing. So yeah, there's the Craftsman for you guys. It was a pretty quick project, but whoever buys it will have a good machine to work with, nice and clean. It's not like it's all rusted out and beat up and everything. I mean, like I said, all you have to do is drop the motor in and she's good to go. New battery and everything. Here's the manual for it, with spec numbers and everything, parts, and how to service it and everything. Everything's there. Steers good, steers nice and easy. Fuel tank is clean. Everything else under it is clean. Like I said, the battery's new, so it works. I mean, you can hear the solenoid click and everything when you turn the key and everything. Lower deck lift works fine. Drive belt's in good shape. It shifts nice and easy. And that's really all there is to it. So if any of you guys are interested in buying this thing, let me know. I'm going to put it up for sale on Craigslist. Still have to think of a price, but it would make a good project for someone. It's literally just as easy as plug and play. Drop a new motor in, and there you go. Get it all wired up, and you should be good to go. And get the PTO mounted up too. So there you go. I'm going to put it up for sale now.